Some games dropped decades ago, and the world just wasn't ready for them. Too ambitious, too misunderstood, or just way too far ahead of the hardware they launched on. These weren't flops. They were prophecies in disguise, games that predicted the future, shaped entire genres, or simply pulled off mechanics that didn't make sense until years later. Hey, it's Chris from HiddenPatch, and today we're diving into the games that were so ahead of their time. They didn't just age well, they finally make sense now. First up, a stealth sequel that didn't just break the fourth wall, it predicted the digital future. Metal Gear Solid 2. They said it was just another stealth sequel. But what it actually did was predict the modern internet. In 2001, people thought Kojima had lost his mind. You barely play as Snake, the plot dives into post-truth politics, and the final act spirals into a breakdown about digital control, memes, and information warfare. Most players didn't get it, not because they weren't paying attention, but because the real world hadn't caught up yet. Fast forward to today, and MGS2 reads like a conspiracy manifesto that aged into reality. The AI censorship, fake news, algorithmic control, it's basically 2025's timeline. No other game at the time dared to tackle that kind of meta-societal manipulation, wrapped in a stealth action shell. It was too much for its generation, and that's why it's perfect now. Next, a first-person parkour game that sprinted a whole decade ahead of the industry. Mirror's Edge. Before parkour was cool, before movement became meta, this game was sprinting across rooftops in style. In 2008, Mirror's Edge dropped with a first-person parkour system so fluid, it felt like you were actually there. No guns, unless you really wanted them. No overstuffed HUD. Just pure movement and momentum. The clean, sterile art direction, straight out of an IKEA fever dream, and way ahead of the noisy visual chaos most games were pushing at the time. It didn't land commercially. People weren't ready for a game that punished combat and rewarded precision flow. But nowadays, Mirror's Edge is seen as a blueprint. Dying Light, Titanfall 2, even indie hits like Ghost Runner, they all owe something to Faith's rooftop runs. It just took the rest of the industry a decade to catch up. Time to paint the scene, literally. This next game turned brushstrokes into a battle system. Okami. While everyone was chasing realism, this game turned Japanese inkwash into gameplay. Released in 2006, Okami didn't just look different, it played different. You controlled Amaterasu, a literal sun goddess in wolf form, restoring a cursed world using a paintbrush. Combat, puzzles, world interaction, all tied to drawing symbols on the screen with the celestial brush. It was bold, beautiful, and completely misread by the mainstream. Critics loved it, sure. But the market didn't get it. It launched near the end of the PS2's life, got buried by bigger names, and was dismissed as Zelda but weirder. But years later, when people started demanding more art-driven experiences and open-ended world design, Okami resurfaced like a myth. And today, it's finally praised for what it always was. One of the most artistically innovative games of all time.
Now for a game that let you be a god, and punishes you for acting like one. Black and White. A god game where your divine power came with consequences, and your pet could literally become a demon. Released in 2001 by Lionhead Studios, Black and White was something nobody could really describe at the time. It wasn't quite an RTS, wasn't really a sim, and definitely wasn't your standard god game. You controlled a giant hand in the sky, shaping villages, tossing fireballs, or nurturing your people. But the real game? It was your creature, a massive AI-driven pet that learned from your actions. And I mean really learned. Slap it when it messes up, it becomes aggressive. Feed it well, praise it when it helps villagers, and it becomes gentle. The game was reading your morality long before Paragon Renegade meters were even a thing. It also featured gesture-based spell casting, dynamic environments that reacted to your karma, and a sandbox-like structure that let you define your own godhood. This wasn't pick good or evil. It was become good or evil by how you naturally play. But here's the kicker. The AI was too advanced. Most players didn't understand it. Reviewers called it inconsistent. and the idea of a game adapting to you wasn't fully appreciated in a pre-Reddit, pre-Twitch era. It was messy, bold, and years ahead of its time. We didn't deserve black and white in 2001. But it paved the way for everything from Fable to The Sims 4 to Shadow of Mordor's Nemesis system. This next game was so good, it took its console to the grave with it. Panzer Dragoon Saga. Imagine an RPG so cinematic, so emotionally layered, and so ahead of its console that it literally destroyed its own future. In 1998, Panzer Dragoon Saga launched on the Sega Saturn. And if you've never played it, that's because only 30,000 English copies were ever made. That's tragic because this game had no business being this good on a dying console. It combined fully voiced dialogue, cinematic camera work, real-time 3D battles with tactical positioning, and a branching narrative system in the 90s. It was basically Final Fantasy, Star Fox, and Mass Effect before any of them even peaked. But here's the twist. Panzer Dragoon Saga didn't just get buried by the Saturn's collapse. It got completely orphaned. No re-releases, no ports, no remasters. The source code? Lost forever. So what we're left with is this almost mythical title. A game that gave players full control of a dragon in a massive open world, fused turn-based combat with flight tactics, and asked real moral questions, while the rest of the industry was still figuring out how to render smooth faces. Critics knew it was a masterpiece, but the audience never got to experience it. It was too ambitious, too rare, and too tied to a system that was already on life support. Today, it's spoken about with the kind of reverence reserved for holy texts. And if you ever track down a copy, congrats. You've just time traveled to one of gaming's greatest lost futures. Before open world was even a genre, this game built one from scratch in 1999. Outcast. You probably haven't played Outcast, and honestly, that's part of the tragedy. Released for PC right before the millennium flipped, Outcast used its own custom voxel engine to create a seamless, living world. No loading screens, no pre-baked assets, just raw mathematical sorcery powering an alien landscape. While other games were struggling with 3D movement, Outcast let you explore dynamic ecosystems, talk to hundreds of NPCs, and tackle quests in whatever order made sense to you. Its world, Adelpha, wasn't just background. It was reactive. Characters had daily routines, the environment changed based on your progress, and missions had ripple effects. And this wasn't some on-rails corridor shooter. This was a fully open, sci-fi adventure game that felt like it landed straight from the future. But the tech was too much. You needed a high-end PC, the marketing was all over the place, and the game barely made a dent commercially. Most people skipped it. And years later, when games like Morrowind, Gothic, or Mass Effect started getting praised for their world building, Outcast quietly watched from the shadows like, yeah, we did that first. It wasn't just ahead of its time, it invented the time. Quick checkpoint. If any of these games have you yelling, wait, that came out when? Then smash that like button and subscribe to HiddenPatch. We've got more mind-blowing retrospectives and cursed gaming timelines coming your way. Still here? You've officially earned yourself a secret achievement. Drop that in the comments if you've ever played a game that just felt too smart for the year it came out. Next up, a game that stripped away everything, enemies, dialogue, even music, and still managed to tell one of the most haunting stories in gaming, Shadow of the Colossus. When Shadow of the Colossus launched in 2005 on the PS2, most people didn't know what to make of it. You ride through a massive empty world, scale towering beasts and cinematic boss battles, and ask yourself questions the game never answers. There's no traditional combat, no XP bar, no HUD cluttering your screen. It was a minimalist masterpiece disguised as a monster hunting game. And that silence, it wasn't lazy, it was intentional. Shadow of the Colossus trusted the player to feel things instead of being told what to feel. The world was hauntingly still, the colossi majestic and tragic, and the story barely spoken. hit harder than any cutscene could. This game said, what if you're not the hero? What if you're the villain, pretending to be the savior? But in 2005, most gamers weren't ready for that kind of introspective design. It was too weird, too empty, too slow. It got good reviews, but didn't explode. Years later, though, people looked back and realized, oh, this was art. And now, you don't just see Shadow of the Colossus in remakes. You see its DNA in Breath of the Wild, Elden Ring, Journey, and every game that uses silence as a storytelling tool. It didn't just change how we fight bosses, it changed how we think about guilt, loneliness, and consequence in games. Let's shift gears. Before open-world chaos became Rockstar's signature move, this PS1 game lets you roam the city like a movie stunt driver in 1999. 1. Driver. If you grew up thinking GTA 3 invented open-world driving, think again. Driver was already peeling out in fully explorable cities 2 years earlier. You played as an undercover cop named Tanner, tasked with pulling off getaways, tailing suspects, and weaving through traffic in classic muscle cars that handled like they weighed 1,000 pounds. In a good way. What made Driver so far ahead of its time wasn't just the free roam. It was how it blended cinematic flair with physics-based driving. You weren't just navigating city grids, you were replicating 70s car chases, complete with burnout mechanics, destructible objects, and cops that actually tried to outsmart you. There were no guns, no shooting, just pure car control and tension. And if you couldn't beat the infamous tutorial garage at the beginning, you weren't alone. That thing lives rent-free in gamers' heads to this day. But Driver didn't get the legacy it deserved. When GTA exploded by letting you exit vehicles and go full chaos mode, Driver got left in the dust. Ironically, its own sequel tried to copy GTA and lost its identity in the process. Still, Driver laid the groundwork for every open-world driving experience that followed. It was fast, cinematic, and unforgiving. And if it had dropped just a couple years later, it would have been a franchise juggernaut instead of a cult classic. Ready for a mind-melting fever dream of a shooter? You're gonna need a tutorial. Too bad it doesn't have one. Divine Cybermancy. What if Deus Ex, Warhammer 40k, and a fever dream had a baby and gave it no tutorial? This game isn't just ahead of its time, it's barely understandable in any time. Released in 2011, Divine Cybermancy threw players into a brutal cyberpunk dystopia, full of ancient conspiracies, mind-hacking, psionic powers, katana-wielding space monks, and RPG systems so complex you'd think you were playing an academic research sim disguised as a shooter. And nothing is explained. The game opens with dream logic, dialogue trees wrapped in philosophical riddles, and UI elements that look like they belong on an alien spaceship. You've got multiple overlapping factions, a karma system that affects reality, and weapon stats so detailed they make Escape from Tarkov look casual. The game doesn't hold your hand. It pushes you into the void and whispers, figure it out. At launch, most players bounced off it hard. It was clunky, overwhelming, and unapologetically weird. But those who stuck with it, they found something incredible. A sandbox where hacking a robot mid-fight, mind-controlling a soldier, summoning eldritch powers, and slicing through enemies with a glowing monoblade were all viable strategies at once. And now, games like Prey, Dishonored, and Cyberpunk 2077 borrow pieces of what I was already doing in 2011, blending immersive sim freedom with layered RPG mechanics. It was messy, broken, brilliant, and way too smart for the time it dropped. Before we hit the final game, here's one more that deserves a shout-out. Here's one that basically invented console MMOs before anyone asked. Phantasy Star Online. Phantasy Star Online wasn't just ahead of its time, it was practically from another timeline. Released in 2000 for the Sega Dreamcast, this was one of the first online RPGs ever made for consoles. Real-time co-op combat, loot grinding, and global lobbies, all running on dial-up. That was sci-fi in real life. While the online infrastructure wasn't ready, and most players didn't even know how to set it up, the blueprint PSO left behind would go on to shape Destiny, Monster Hunter, and modern MMOs alike.
It didn't just predict online play, it practically forced it into existence. And finally, before BioShock, Prey, or even the phrase immersive sim, this game did it all in 1994. System Shock. System Shock didn't just invent a genre. It straight up dragged the industry into the future, whether it was ready or not. Released on MS-DOS in '94, this game combined first-person shooting, RPG stat management, environmental storytelling, inventory puzzles, and one of the most iconic AIs in gaming, Shodan. And it did all of this in full 3D, with mouse look and non-linear exploration. Back when most people were still playing Doom with arrow keys. You weren't just blasting enemies, you were hacking security systems, reading logs, solving mysteries, piecing together what went wrong on a doomed space station, all while being psychologically harassed by a rogue AI who thinks you're an insect. That kind of layered storytelling and player agency, nothing else came close at the time. The problem? It was too early. The UI was clunky, the systems overwhelmed players, and even critics were like, cool, but huh? It sold poorly, but the devs, Looking Glass Studios, didn't care. They were designing the future. And that future turned into Deus Ex, BioShock, Prey, Dishonored, and basically every modern immersive sim that gives you freedom to play your way. System Shock wasn't just ahead of its time. It was operating in a whole different reality. And we're still catching up. Some of these games launched years, even decades, before the world was ready for them. They didn't flop because they were bad. They flopped because they were too good, too weird, or too ahead of what players expected at the time. But that's what makes them legendary now. Thanks for watching, and if you've ever played one of these games way before everyone else caught on, you already know you were ahead of your time too. And hey, if you made it this far, you just unlocked another secret achievement. Drop that in the comments if you've ever played a game that made you feel like you were living in the future. Hit that like button, subscribe to HiddenPatch, and check out one of our other deep dives if you want more gaming brain rot in the best way possible. See you in the next video. This is Chris from HiddenPatch, signing off.